I'm sending it to the live. I have no idea when it actually picks us up, so
Awesome. Hi,
don't
everyone.
say anything.
We're live.
Um, yeah, says it's connecting.
All right. And you have it pulled up to see comments?
Yes.
Cool.
Hi, I think we're live. Welcome to Office Hours with Colin Mustful and Melissa Makarewicz. Melissa, hi, how are you?
I'm doing great. Made it to Friday. The sun's shining here in Ohio, so all is well. How about you in Minnesota?
I'm doing well. We had a very windy morning, and we have snow moving in Saturday night into Sunday, and it's supposed to be pretty significant. So I'm looking forward to that because I like snow.
Now, are you going to run when it snows? Because I saw your post you had the other day that you tried to run and it was snowing in the morning.
Yeah, I'm going running tomorrow morning. We probably won't have snow yet. Sunday, I take the day off from running, but Monday I will go out no matter what. And it's actually supposed to be about 0 degrees Monday morning.
Oh my goodness.
So I'll have to bundle up and it'll be a little bit challenging, but if the sidewalks are plowed, I'll be okay.
Yeah. You need to share on Substack. Let us see some of your posts from like your early morning run because I think you had one where you said the sun was coming up and it was beautiful or something. Um, yeah, let us see what's happening on those early morning
Okay,
runs for
I'll
Minnesota
try.
weather report.
For those who don't know, I run marathons, I don't know, once a year, once every other year. And so I'm training for a marathon that is this summer, but I live in Minnesota where it can be kind of challenging to run in the morning in February and March, snow, ice, cold, all that stuff. So,
Nice. Well, it's exciting.
yeah. Well, let's dive into our first topic. We didn't have any questions in the chat, so we'll just talk about a few other things. You wanted to talk about like creating content that isn't boring, that actually engages an audience and reflects like what you want, where you want to bring your audience to. So can you talk a little bit about what you mean there?
Yeah, absolutely. So this came up from a call with a client that I had this week, and it's this struggle that I see happen with a lot of I think authors and people outside of it too. Like, who are you talking to? How are you creating content that fits with the offer that you're trying to make? And then how do you come up with what that content is? So, this call that I have with a client, she was struggling to come up with social media ideas. And so she was very excited because she came up with an idea that she was like, oh, I think I could talk about this because it would be easy for her to do. And the idea was related to very deep dive, like editing process sort of style stuff. And so whenever somebody brings me with an idea on the writing side of using that on their social media, I like to take a pause with them and just think about the why behind posting it. So I don't think there's any like right content, wrong content for authors to be posted necessarily relating to their writing process. But, and we covered this in the last workshop that I taught, and we'll be talking about again in the workshop next week. What are you trying to lead people to? So she and I talked about if ultimately her goal is to maybe do book coaching, that can be like a step up that a lot of people like to do after they have a bunch of books under their belt. She has a big publisher, big five publisher. So if that's the ultimate goal, then yes, like letting people see that behind the scenes kind of stuff that she's doing could very well be an intentional plan. But if our goal is to be selling books, and right now for her, we're in a big pre-order push, um, we want to be pitching people things that connect to the books themselves, the genre that she's writing in. So she's women's fiction, and that cues to people that are coming across her content in a general way, then what is the content that her books are about as well. Um, so for example, we actually ended up doing a like would you rather mom edition because her books are women's fiction. They have moms featured for the main characters. And one of them that got a lot of comments was a would you rather have to dig through the dumpster to find your child's retainer or I don't remember what the other side of things was, but that in particular resonated with a lot of people because I feel like it's kind of if you had a retainer or you've had a kid have a retainer, like how many people end up accidentally ending up with them in the trash. And that
Hmm.
was a great connector for people. And then they get the vibe that we can then talk about. Her characters kind of are going through some of these same things in their life in the story. So neither one is a no answer. It's just what are we trying to do with the content and which one is going to best serve the results that we're looking for in that content.
Yeah, I feel like it's easy to just use what you're doing as content, and I think that's good. But you're kind of suggesting that you have to take it one step further, is don't just put it out there. You think about why, because then ultimately you might just be putting out content that doesn't help you reach your goal.
Right. It's speaking to potentially other authors on the craft side of things, but it's not helping people learn about your story. Now, it could be, Jillian, for example, she takes to writing trips, she's featuring the places that she's traveling. That's great content. That's exciting the readers. And it also speaks to what she's doing behind the scenes as she's getting ready to write. That's her research side of things. So that can be a piece of the process that is easy to build that connection. But do I, as a reader, really care, when you're doing line edits? Probably not. I just want to read the story and know what it's about. So yeah, just something to think about with each piece that you do. How is this connecting? What's the purpose of the content that you're creating?
Hmm. And like you said, it creates a funnel, so it's not just a random spattering of stuff.
Absolutely. And you had a busy week with a lot of stuff going on the podcast side of things, which is always fun to see with History Through Fiction when it's podcast season time. So can you talk a little bit about the process of like pitching to podcasts? What happens with authors that are looking to maybe get on podcasts themselves, and how do they go about that?
Well, I'm shocked by how many people want to be on our podcast, History Through Fiction, the podcast. I've had it now for about 5 years, and we're up to maybe 130 episodes. Um, and so I get requests multiple times a day, really. So it's really hard to keep up with. And well, one thing I should mention is I did shift our distribution from, so it was with Squarespace, which is our website host. And I shifted it to rss.com. That's more of a professional actual podcast distributor, where Squarespace is a website creator. But it also allowed me to put ads in the episode. So if you listen to the podcast and you're like, what are these ads doing here? I'm sorry, I gave in. I'm like, I have to try and generate some direct revenue. The podcast generates revenue in other ways and builds lots of connections, but I finally gave in and like, well, I have to find a way to monetize this. So that was one change. But in any case, I have a request form on our website, historythroughfiction.com/podcast, where if somebody wants to be on the podcast, they can submit a request there. But as I told you, I have more than I can keep up with, and I already have, so many episodes recorded and ready to go, and I actually have 19 interviews scheduled throughout April and May, and like that's a ton of work. So if you want to be on a podcast, first of all, like try to understand what the podcaster is up against, because they might not be making money from this. They probably have a lot of requests. So don't feel like you're being rejected if you don't hear back from them, for one. For another thing is just be very aware of who you're reaching out to. Does my audience align with their audience? Will my topics be of interest to this podcast? And if so, how? Because otherwise you're just kind of wasting your time. And then you may want to take it a step further beyond just the request or just the email. Before even approaching the podcast, you may want to engage with something that they're already doing. Because if I see a request from some rando, I am less likely to say, yes, I want this person on my podcast, unless something within their topic speaks to me specifically. If I see a name that I recognize, I'm much, much more likely to invite them on the podcast. So, I mean, that could be something as simple as showing up to our office hours and start commenting so that I'll see their name and recognize it. So it is, I just want people, writers out there to be aware of why it's so challenging to be on podcasts, because podcasters are getting so many requests. We do appreciate the interest, but then in order to actually end up on that podcast, just be aware there could be a wait. You may have to find, a very direct connection. And the best thing you can do is just engage with them before you make the request.
Now, at what point in the process should somebody start reaching out to podcasts? So say I'm writing a book, but I don't have a book yet. Should I wait until the book's released before I approach people? And how do I know what I'm asking them to do? Do I say I'd like to talk about my book or this topic? How do I approach you as an author?
Yes.
Okay.
You should absolutely start before, just like, I mean, we talk about this all the time. You have to balance the writing versus the content, and versus kind of showing up and being out there. And that is a challenging balance, but it is something that is really valuable, is to show up before that book is ready, before the first draft is done, before the manuscript is finalized. And I see that with a lot of authors, several that are actually going to be at our History Through Fiction conference, where they've already started to establish a platform. They started to kind of share their journey, and that creates, it builds a platform for them, an audience for them, but also generates more interest just in who they are and what they're doing, where they're from, why they're writing what they're writing. Because it can be hard to curate a website and a platform that is engaging and of interest, because I'm going to visit your website. If you make a request, I'm going to go look at your website. And if it just looks like you put something up there just to highlight your book, then I'm not going to be as interested in an actual person who's showing us their journey and what they're going through. So start as early as you can. And like I said, identify some podcasts and podcasters that you might want to engage with, and start engaging with their content, following them on social media, just making comments on their posts, and on some of their other interviews. And then when you do reach out, it is okay to ask, can I be on your podcast? Because ultimately that's what you want to do. Just make sure that they already know who you are, and that your book or your topic is somehow related to what they're doing, and that there's audience crossover there.
Can I ask another follow-up question that I
Sure.
just thought of as you were talking? So say again, I'm an author, don't have my first book out yet. Do I need to already have a website if I'm approaching somebody like you, or can a healthy social media presence, is that significant enough that you see I'm putting in the effort? Or maybe I have a Substack going,
Mhm.
but no actual website itself.
Well, website's certainly not a requirement, but it is pretty standard, pretty traditional to have a website, usually just your name. But that doesn't mean that you can't. Substack certainly works, or a strong social media presence. It's just something that shows that you're active, and that this is something that you're not just going to show up, do the podcast, and then never promote it. The podcasters, they want to get more exposure as well. So
Right.
it's more of a partnership than just taking from them. You want to be able to give them something as well.
Perfect. And I do have one extra tip to throw into that. As someone who searches for podcasts for clients, when you're looking for ones to approach, go and check to see when was their last episode released, because you would
Mhm.
be surprised how many defunct podcasts there are out there. So you don't want to waste your time approaching a podcast that hasn't posted in 3, 4, 5 years from their last episode, because they're probably not actively recording anything new at that point in time. So take a look at that and do your due diligence before you take the time to email.
Yeah, definitely. And that's one thing I look at as well, is how often is this author blogging? Are they staying current? I think that's really important. I see that Alina Adams is watching over on Substack Live. So, hi, Alina. If you have any questions for us, please feel free to drop it in the chat and we'll discuss it.
Her beautiful covers right over your shoulder.
Yeah. Well, Melissa, let's talk. You just talked about a website, and if you need it, so once you do have that website and you do have that social media, how do you utilize your online presence as an author?
So I think it's all about knowing kind of what are you trying to do? Again, like kind of back to the same things with your presence online. Are you looking to solely use it to promote your book? And that can be a very specific form of content that you're putting out. It's, maybe you're just driving home like the themes, the tropes, really heavily promoting the book, or you're looking to be a bit broader and grow a community of people around, say, historical fiction and your love of a certain time period. So you could be blogging, like you're doing a lot of research and that's what you're writing about on there, and you're sharing it for other people to enjoy, as well as attracting readers along the way, from something like that. So I think it's again about like just being intentional and knowing what you're trying to do in the space, and also not trying to show up everywhere. um know what your goal is, and then what platforms lend best to goal. um I think there's a platform for everyone that fits best. I think we just naturally have like certain styles of how we best create content. So for some people, they love to just pick up the camera and record and film something on there. So you could be posting like little snippets along the way of, little things that you're finding, as you're writing. You could be sharing reviews of books that are similar to what you're writing. Sometimes that can help to draw in people as well, because you typically have, like one book for a year maybe that you're releasing as an author. Maybe you're a bit more rapid release than that, but people need to read a lot more books in between. So helping them find other things to read along the way could be the give that you have, and you're a voracious reader, so that could be the pieces of content that you're sharing. um but I think your presence has to feel genuine to who you are, comfortable, whatever your style and your format is, and then don't try to show up on platforms that you just really don't enjoy going on. And there is kind of that business aspect where we do have to show up and do things that we don't absolutely love. Um, but if you're gonna post on Twitter and every time you open it up, you feel like you want to burn the world down, then don't go on that app. If going to Substack Notes, you connect really well with people on there and you really love the vibes that they have, and you enjoy restacking with other people, sharing things from um post articles that you're reading, like that would be a much healthier environment for you to show up on, and I think it will fuel you more creatively to be in a space like that.
I like what you mentioned about filling in the gaps like between books. And I feel that way with my website, my author website, because my last book came out in 2023 and I have started drafting a new one. But I mean, that's if that ever gets done, it won't be till like 2028. So in the meantime, my focus is actually just on speaking, getting speaking gigs and um, teaching, like teaching craft. And I did recently book a presentation, and I'm going to be teaching at a local community center. And so that's kind of what I update the website regularly, once every year, year and a half or so, depending on where I'm at and what kind of audience, in what way I'm looking for them to engage with me. So I'm not really trying to sell books. I'm not trying to sell my previous books. I mean, they're there, but I'm not either focusing on my next book. I'm focusing on me as an expert in a certain field and in getting presentations and speaking
Yeah,
engagements and things.
that's that piece of the funnel of like the big giant top of the funnel. Like, what is the content that you're sharing the whole year to bring in interest or to build credibility, or your give that you're sharing with people that keeps them coming back? Because if you don't have that top layer of what's bringing people to your social media channel, wanting to read your newsletter, and it's just about book sales, book sales, book sales. Well, if I've read your book, I'm why do I need to return and see what content you have? But, if you're reviewing, books on the Oregon Trail, and like you're every month sharing like 5 new reads for people, and that's the topic that I absolutely love reading. It also helps because your book is or books are in the same setting, then that's going to bring that very specific reader. I mean, obviously you could go broader than that, but just to give an example of figuring out what's the kind of give that you have that sustains your um, presence, your community that you're building over time, the people that keep coming back, have to have a reason why to do that. Like people don't just open your newsletter because your name is on it. Like I need to have a reason why. I don't care if it goes to spam, and I make sure that I get that newsletter every month. There's an author years ago, and she published her newsletter once a month, and there was a piece of flash fiction um, every month that she had in her newsletter. And it made me look to like check the date to see when that was coming because it was such an enjoyable quick read. It was something fresh. And then it gave me a taste of her writing. And then every time she had a pre-order, I already knew that I wanted to like have more from her than these flash fiction stories. She would give polls for readers to kind of vote on themes, tropes that they would enjoy seeing. So she was connecting with her readers, finding out what they were interested in, and it could make its way into a whole book. So kind of like a little taste of writing to market a bit there, but get people excited so that when your content is coming, it's bringing value and something that they look forward to, not just another email that lands in the inbox, another piece of content that they had to post to Facebook. Um,
Hmm.
give them a reason to like, share, comment. Like, what do you bring to your content? And that's where I would say like less can be more. Like if you feel like you can't put out a daily piece of content that you really feel is worth sharing with people, then dial it back to 3 days a week. If that's like you really feel like you can put out good pieces of content,
Hmm.
it will be worth pulling back to put out the pieces that speak to people because then they kind of take on a life of their own a little bit in between as well.
Nice. Have
Yeah,
you been over on BookTube at all? I'm kind of fascinated by, I mean, speaking of like showing up on places where you connect with, I cannot figure out BookTube, but they certainly have seemed like they have a close-knit community and they know where to show up and how.
absolutely. I think some of those creators have done such a great job of if my reading taste aligns with a certain booktuber's reading taste, then I know I can just trust the books that they're reviewing over there, and I don't even I don't even need to know the blurb. Like, yes, absolutely. If they're telling me to read it, then I need to read it. And it's really they've built up a great community of people that, they have similar tastes in reading. They know what they like. There's also some uh, great authors over there to find that have done a really good job of like finding unique ways to share their life, their blogs and stuff like that, leading up to each book release um, in a creative way. I find really fascinating as well.
Yeah.
Well, I know we were talking about not leading with the behind the scenes kind of stuff about writing, but we're talking to authors here, so we can go ahead and talk about that sort of stuff. And I know you had a topic you wanted to talk about, kind of letting the characters drive the story, not necessarily the history. I'm interested to hear what you have about that topic to share with us.
Well, as I sit down to write my next novel, the first time I sat down to write a novel was 16 years ago, and I've learned a lot since then. And started out as a historian, and I was always trying to make sure that I got every historical fact detail
Yeah.
absolutely correct. And at the time, I didn't understand why that doesn't work in fiction. And I just had, you know, it was for a good reason. I had integrity for the historical process. But there's a few things I didn't understand. One is nobody really knows what happened. The historical record gets altered. It gets different people perceive it in different ways over time, and sometimes it gets perpetuated in a way that is false, anyways. And unless you were an eyewitness and you were there, like there's no way to really know for sure. All you can do is gather multiple sources and trying to figure out for yourself. So that's one reason why when you're writing a historical novel, you don't have to be overly concerned with getting every last minute by minute detail the way some secondary source is telling you it went down, because that might not be true. But then the other thing is all my previous novels were based on a scaffold of historical events where I would write about each historical event, and I would only use the characters as a way to get me from one historical detail to the next.
Right.
And I only knew as an outline that I wanted to cover, you know, these events from 1868 to 1871, and I would slip the characters in between each one of those things. But that doesn't really work. Um, so as I'm writing now, I'm actually thinking constantly with each line, how does this reflect on the character, on the decisions that they're making, the decisions they're going to be like especially thinking about the decisions they're going to be faced with, because the reader subconsciously is going to remember this moment and how the character responded to it, and that's going to play into their expectations with later on how the character actually responds to a situation. So I was actually quite proud of myself because I was writing about something that's an event called the Lake Chetek Massacre, and there was an attack at this settlement called Lake Chetek, and many people actually died, and it was very chaotic, very traumatic. But like I said, nobody actually knows what happened. I can go back and trace the sources and try to figure out exactly where people were and when. So there's one point where I know the mother, Laura, went into the woods with her children, but that didn't fit with where I was trying to take them next. And so I actually decided not to have her go into the woods with her children. And that was something I had to think about, like, actively. But ultimately, it serves my purpose of creating this engaging narrative that does open people's eyes up to this event, but more importantly, the overall period in history and what was happening, the conflicts that were happening between white settlers and Native Americans in that region. So yes, as I'm writing now, it's much different than when I wrote 10 years ago. I'm thinking more about what would the characters do and why, and less about what are the exact historical details and movements, because that doesn't serve the purpose of the narrative.
This seems like it's unique to historical fiction because when you're writing a fictional story, you're just making up your world and you're creating, but you kind of have this like marrying of two things where you're trying to tell this historical narrative and then you're also trying to create a really great fictional story that keeps people entertained. Do you think that that is unique to this genre that you're writing?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely doesn't have the standards of an academic history, which you have to have citations and peer review and all that kind of stuff. So yes, it's unique in that sense. I guess I would just say you do want to be careful about not intentionally misrepresenting history.
Right.
Um, but as I said, yeah, there's a whole nother layer there of trying to find a way to have the reader engage with the experience, not the actual details, minute by minute details. And there are multiple factors in thinking about how you do that, how you keep it authentic, while but also making sure that it is entertaining, that it is engaging, and that it does make sense to the reader, because history doesn't always make sense, and that would be disruptive to the fictional dream if you wrote about that.
I think as a historical fiction reader, my opinion is that I like a book to serve the purpose of making me think. Like, I think history should make us question what we're doing, where are we going, get us interested in past events, look at them through different lenses. So I love that a book introduces me to historical stories that maybe I don't know as much about, but I don't expect it to do the heavy lifting of actually giving me every fact as it's noted, true or not,
Mhm.
um, in the
There's certainly
records.
different levels depending on the author and what they're trying to accomplish. If um, because there are some historical fiction novels that just do not interest me because they take so many creative liberties. And I do, as the publisher at History Through Fiction, I do really look for authors that are deep in that research and do have integrity for the historical process, but understand the craft elements of fiction and why those are so important, and need to be utilized.
Absolutely. Now's a great time to plug, go to the History Through Fiction shop and pick up some new books this week. Because there's so many great books just sitting there around so many different points in history for people to grab.
Yeah, that's the best part of my job, is learning all these just interesting historical events and people, and in an engaging way, and in a way I wouldn't have ever learned about them in school or in some textbook or something like that. Oh, well,
Absolutely.
we should wrap things up, but let's do a couple plugs. So you have a workshop coming up.
Absolutely. This
That's
one's going to be a bit more interactive than the last one. So I'm super excited about this. We're going to really sit down and think through our funnels that we have. We've been talking about that a lot. I feel like the beginning of this year, we're going to be intentional, and the authors will kind of leave with a plan of action of things that they can go and implement over the next month to set themselves up for success for the rest of the year, for really focusing on how they are funneling people to create more sales, to bring in a bigger community space, and attract people in the way that they are designing their content to do.
Yeah, you can find that on, if you go to Eventbrite and search History Through Fiction, you'll find that there you can register there. We also have 7 sessions on Wednesday the 18th. That's a part of our History Through Fiction conference, but you can register for those individually. Find those on Eventbrite. I think you can find those on our website, historythroughfiction.com/events. So you can pick and choose which topics you're most interested in. I also wanted to mention that I have 2 workshops coming up in April, if we have writers out there interested. One is a 4-part series called How to Write History Through Fiction. And I have 3 history through fiction authors where I actually analyze their books. I say, this is what works. And it's a different element for each book. So for instance, The Boy with the Jade, I'm looking at the character development in that one. And then we do look at Alina Adams' Go On Pretending, and the history, how she uses history to be able to tell that story. So if you want a deeper dive into like legit historical fiction and the craft behind it, that's for you, How to Write History Through Fiction. And then I've also opened up a mentorship that's 6 months. It's a group coaching program. I have a couple writers interested. I might not go through it if we don't get enough interest, but I'm opening it up to 6 writers, and I give you feedback once a month on 20 pages of writing, and then we meet to talk about different elements of craft. And it's a good way to get some coaching, but to do it in a group setting where you're actually networking with other writers and kind of seeing what they're going through, and you can kind of go back and forth with them and have a shared experience. And it also creates a level of accountability.
Really, that group coaching is so great for someone that's like nervous about starting, but really wants to become more polished with their writing, and also to connect with other writers in a new way and have your expertise as well. I was super excited when I saw that posted the other day. That's a great opportunity for people to grab.
Yeah. Uh, so next 2 weeks from now, we do office hours on the second and fourth Friday. The fourth Friday this month is the 27th. I'll be at the conference. So Melissa, should we just
Yeah,
take a
we'll
break next?
we'll just prioritize the conference and maybe we'll throw in an extra one early or something like that to promote
Okay.
some things. But I think yeah, I know I'll be virtually excited to be there. You'll be there in person. There's a lot going on. So that gives more people more time to ask us questions so they can ask away in the chat over on your Substack and anything they have, we'll answer it next time around.
Okay, great. Well, then I think the one next Friday after that would be April 10th. But anyways, I'll put up all that information and
Yeah.
I guess we'll see you next time on Office Hours. Thanks, Melissa.
Bye everyone. Yeah.